coming. My name's Tim Sullivan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Cendyn. Before we get started, you have a card in front of you. That's for a drawing for either an Apple Watch or a pair of Tiffany earrings. If you'd fill that out and turn it in, we'll be selecting the winner, and that'll be posted on social media later today. So we're here today to talk about personalization at scale. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a setup, and then Michael's going to come up and we're going to do a panel with some experts in the industry here, and then we'll take any questions that you guys have. So when we talk about personalization, and as hoteliers, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about the guest journey and what happens from the moment when people are thinking about traveling, booking, their pre-stay activities, the arrival, what happens on property, and then they leave. And the challenge today is that some parts of that journey have been optimized, and some of them still maintain a lot of friction. So there's a challenge there. The bar has been set with very good personalization at some touch points in that journey, and others have not kept up. So think about your own travel experience, maybe even coming to this show, starting with the flight. I was in a situation where for several years I was taking a cross-country flight to commute for work. And I was on the same flight every other week, Monday out, Friday back in. And I'd picked an airline that I really appreciated the brand. I liked what they did. Obviously, after many years of doing that, I'd reached the top tier of their loyalty program. And I would have this experience where some flights, I would get to the airport, I'd check in, I'd get upgraded, I'd sit down, and the flight attendant would come over and say, Mr. Sullivan, thanks so much for your business. We appreciate your loyalty. If there's anything I can do for you on this flight, please don't hesitate to ask. Kind of nice, right? A little bit of recognition. That very same flight, the next week, the flight attendant would come over and ask me if I knew how the seat worked. So after hundreds of thousands of miles flying with this company, clearly they had the data available. There was just no operational consistency in place for how to leverage that to deliver a personal experience. On the flight here yesterday, the captain came out of the cockpit, introduced himself to everybody on the plane, and before we landed, I was given this business card with his name on it, with a handwritten note with my seat, the flight, the date. Mr. Sullivan, thank you for your business, Captain Monroe. That's pretty interesting too, right? That's a personalized experience. I guarantee you on my flight home, that's not going to happen. So what's the problem with this personalized experience? Whether you agree with it or not, I thought it was kind of interesting. Some people may think it's an annoyance, but this is not scalable. So nobody has made a decision to operationalize this. Out of his desire to connect with his passengers, he took it upon himself to do this. Then you get to the hotel. 9 times out of 10, what's the first thing they ask you when you step up to the front desk? Have you stayed with us before, right? So most global chains loyalty programs require around 50 nights or more to reach the top tier. And if you do the math on that, that's about 15% of your life. In a given year, that's 15% of the time you're not with your family, you're staying with them, and they aren't even able to recognize you by name. So there's a real disconnect there. And then you check out, and you start getting electronic messages. And I'm sure we've all had these experiences where you're a vegetarian, but you're getting a picture of the steak at the restaurant, or you're on vacation to get some rest, relaxation, go to the spa, and you're getting promos for the nightclub. Even the greeting is a challenge. These are some of my favorite greetings I received in email recently. Dear Sulatima D, my name's in there somewhere. And it's all in caps, which just kind of screams this came from a database, right? This one's better, but still, dear valued guest. So again, if I'm spending 15% of my life with you and you don't know my name, that's a challenge as well. This one, personalization tag misfired. So again, right at the top of the email, it's screaming database marketing. This is probably my favorite. I call it the existential greeting. Dear nothing. And really, what we want is just, how about hello, Tim, right? So why does that happen? Because personalization at scale is exceedingly difficult. It's really hard to do. If you're sending hundreds of millions of messages, there's so many variables in the data, and there's so many opportunities for something to go wrong and not get that right. Even the big guys get it wrong. This is an experience I had recently. Most people think of Amazon as one of the most technologically advanced companies in the world, right? You have Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google. Well, my wife received this email. Hello, Amazon customer, so it wasn't even personalized. Someone recently purchased a gift from your baby registry. I don't want to divulge too much about my personal life, but I guarantee you there is no baby and there's no baby registry in my future. So we chuckled about it a little bit and kind of scratched our head. A full 24 hours later, she received this. So they got her name right this time. Dear Deborah Sherman, earlier today we accidentally sent you an email. We apologize for any confusion this may have caused. That was it. So you can imagine that, we thought it was funny, but that could lead to some pretty awkward conversations depending on the makeup of your household and when that email came in, right? So before we go patting ourselves on the back, though, and saying, yeah, it's really difficult, even the big guys screw it up, think about another step in that journey. So from the flight to the hotel, maybe you used a ride-sharing app. What was the first thing that happened before you got in that car? You greeted the driver by name, and he greeted you by name. You probably had a star rating on him. You knew how many trips he'd taken. There's a little bio about where he came from. He had the information on you. You probably had a conversation about that. This is an example of how technology has been used to provide a very personalized experience and remove the friction from the travel journey. So when a guest has that experience and thanks Jack or Jill or whoever their Uber driver was for the ride and walks up to the front desk for their 50th or 60th stay and are asked, have you stayed with us before? That's a real disconnect. The bar has been set higher already. So why does this matter, right? You might be thinking, who cares? I walk up to the front desk, you can just tell them whether you stayed there before or not, or the flight attendant asking me if the seat worked. It matters for a couple reasons. One is, if I've invested all of this time and energy and money in your brand, and you're not reciprocating that, in that moment you ask me if I've stayed with you before, you've reset our relationship to zero in that moment. So all that effort I'd put in over the years, we're starting from square one from a relationship standpoint in that moment. The other reason it matters is there's real money at stake. So based on our own analysis of the loyalty programs that we're running, loyal guests book at a 47% higher ADR, stay 81% more often, and spend 164% more than non-loyal guest or loyalty program members. So there's real money in the equation here. So why does it happen? Personalization presents a data problem. It's a real challenge. We talked about those hundreds of millions of emails coming out, and there is an absolute flood of data happening right now. Data has reached an exponential growth curve. So about every 2 years, it's doubling. And everybody's walking around now with a supercomputer in their pocket, right? Everything is tagged. We're generating data right now as we're sitting in this room. So there's this floods of data coming in as guests move through that guest journey, and it's a challenge to keep up with. So 60% of marketers said there are neither the processes implemented, organizational structures in place, nor the deep analytical skills needed to execute a comprehensive data strategy in their organizations. 87% of marketers said they rely on data to do their job well, but only less than half believe they have sufficient access to data. So think about that journey again, right? Think about all the different systems that the guest is interacting with as they move through that process, and it creates these disparate data silos. Each one's holding a teeny sliver of information about your guest, but if they're not talking to each other, you never get the complete picture. So it causes this disconnected experience as they move through the process. So how do we manage all this? We believe that in hospitality, CRM and loyalty is a great foundation to get personalization moving forward. And here's how we look at that. There's kind of 3 core pillars there. And we break that down by data, action, and impact. The data is bringing all that data together. So we just talked about all those disparate data silos. If you can bring that together and create an enhanced guest profile, now you can start communicating with your guests in a more compelling way. The action is leveraging that data in an automated fashion, both to deliver targeted digital messages, but also pushing that information to the front lines of the business so your staff has it at their fingertips so they can interact with your guests in more meaningful ways. And then, of course, tracking the whole process so you're constantly optimizing and measuring and testing so you can improve on it and see what's working and what's not. So enhanced guest profiles, again, this is about stitching that data together, providing that single version of truth of your guests. This is just a profile screen in a CRM system. This is the amount of data that you would typically get if the guest booked through an OTA, right? You get a name, you get a little stay information. You might get an email, you might not. You might get a masked email. So when we talk about an enhanced guest profile, pulling all of that data together, we're talking about this. A very rich view of the guest, social media connections, VIP and RFM status codes, full stay history, where they spend their money, what their interests and preferences are as they've reported to you. With this, now you can start building a relationship. Everything we just looked at in that guest profile then can become leveraged to drive communications. Marketing automation would be taking all of that data, analyzing it, understanding who your most valuable guests are and who your most valuable prospects are, and then having a platform in place where you're setting the business rules that you can automatically drive those communications that are targeted, personalized, and relevant across any digital media channel. Now you can start looking at that wheel in a different way where you're identifying all of those touch points and how you're choosing to communicate with the guest in a very personalized manner at each one of those touch points. This is a typical guest lifecycle communication with the options for pre-arrival, arrival, departure, and then ongoing trigger campaigns after the fact, looking at lifestyle, interests, birthdays, anniversary, loyalty. And this can all be automated. This is a sample of an actual workflow that's set up in the system for a resort and what happens pre and post arrival. Once this is mapped out and put in place, nobody has to think about it. You're not pulling a list. You're not doing any calculations. This just runs, and as guests fall into these different triggers, the communications go out in a very personalized way. The second piece of communication automation is data automation. So this is all about taking that same data, identifying guest status, satisfaction, and taking those profiles and preferences in a programmatic way and pushing them out to the front lines of the business. So your call center, your front desk, concierge, or to the website have that same enhanced guest profile information at their fingertips. You can take that information and through smart technology create prompts. So it's analyzing that information in real time, saying this is the most important thing you should be saying to the person standing in front of you, or provide summary type information. So at a glance, you know, this person's a VIP, when they last stayed, how often they stayed. Now that changes that whole arrival ritual that we talked about before. Instead of, have you stayed with us before? That same information's at that front desk agent's fingertips. Anybody here heard of Garry Kasparov? The chess grandmaster? Yeah, he's infamous for being the first human who was beaten by a computer, and he was the best in the world. He was beaten by Big Blue, the IBM computer that was the precursor to IBM's Watson. And when he lost that match, he had an existential crisis. He took it very hard. He questioned kind of what he was doing. He had spent his whole life learning this game and invested all of his passion and energy into this game, and he was beaten by a computer. But the outcome of that was he created a new tournament that was called advanced chess. And the idea of advanced chess was you could have a computer, a human, or a human and a computer as a team that would compete. And what they found over time was the human and the computer combination always won. So computers are very good at doing things like sorting through huge volumes of data very quickly and returning a result. Today, we're getting there, but not so good at picking up nonverbal cues, facial expressions. So that combination, and the reason I tell that story is when we think about hospitality, we're all in a people business, right? This is a relationship business. I don't think anybody's interested in replacing humans. this is not personalization, in my opinion. This is a robot at a hotel in Japan that goes through a script to tell you how to use the machine to check yourself in. What we're talking about looks something more like this, where the front desk has been removed, the agent has a tablet with all of that rich data about the guest, and they're having a conversation at the check-in about the stay. So it's really that combination of removing the friction, empowering the humans in the hotel with the data they need to have a better experience, provide a better experience for the guests. And then, of course, tracking it all, business intelligence and analytics. It's not just capturing the data for the profile, but as they move through that process, understanding what they're responding to, what's working and what's not, so you can create a culture of constant testing and feedback. When you have those real-time feedback loops in place through the analytics, you can move quickly to make adjustments and continue to improve the process. So where's personalization going in the future? With those two categories, marketing automation, data automation, we do have the opportunity to engage the guest at every touch point in their journey in a very personalized manner, but also to engage hotel staff with those same data insights so they can drive more meaningful relationships with your guests. If you think about CRM as predictive intelligence and kind of the centerpiece, there are all these different inputs that can come in. We're tracking guest behavior. We're connected to multiple systems to pull them in. And then there's a whole range of third-party data sources that can be brought in to transform and augment that data. All of that comes in, gets deduped. The rules engine is put in place of how that data gets used and leveraged, and it can push out promos, offers, pricing, recommendations, all personalized, all flowing into the analytics system as well. You know, artificial intelligence will play a piece in this as well. Again, we believe it's not about replacing humans in the hotel, but it's more about putting a foundation of technology in place that will empower your staff, that will drive the outcomes you're looking for, and follow the guest through the entire guest journey with very personalized, relevant, and meaningful messages. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Bennett. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at Cendyn, and we're going to do a little panel discussion with this group now. So Jenna and John, we've heard from Tim. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and your company?
So good morning, everybody. My name is Genevieve Lobos, and I'm the Vice President of Revenue Management for Outrigger Enterprise Group. Outrigger is a collection of 37 hotels based in Honolulu, multi-brand hotels across the Hawaiian island chain, Thailand, Fiji, Mauritius, and Maldives. So welcome, thanks.
Hello, I'm John McAuliffe. I'm the president of a technology company called Achiga. Put simply, we help hotel brands deliver great digital experiences. Our core platform called Live Enterprise is used by a lot of very recognizable hotel brands around the world for web content and digital experience management. So we run about 8,000 digital applications on our platform in 45 languages across 70 countries.
Great, thank you. So John, let's start with you. Personalization can have a lot of meanings. You guys are focused on customer experience and sort of user interface. So talk to it from your lens.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, you're right, Michael. Personalization does have a lot of different meanings. In fact, I think that the challenge with the term personalization is it's becoming a buzzword, and buzzwords quickly become meaningless phrases. I think that personalization is, as Tim was talking about, it's about a lot more than, you know, hi John, welcome to our website. It's about contextual and relevant experiences and delivering those to consumers across every one of your customer engagement channels. So I kind of think about personalization more from the perspective of contextualization. And you know, really to be good at contextual marketing, it's incumbent upon the digital marketer to personalize the experience across all customer engagement channels, whether that's the website, whether that's an email, whether that's a social media campaign, whether that's at the front desk. So it's really about delivering content to the consumer that takes into consideration both previous and current interactions that they have with the brand to start that conversation and to create that bond.
Great. Jenna, same question, but revenue management, revenue generation.
Sure. So personalization for revenue optimization is really taking the relationship that you were talking about, Tim, and bringing that to giving them recommendations of offers, rates, experiences that they can have in their travel buying experience to make it as easy to buy as possible. And I think sometimes as hoteliers, we like to complicate things. We like to put too many offers out on the shelf, and we shouldn't give that to our consumers to have to filter through to figure out what they want. So it's about making it the right recommendation to the customer on not just on you're a loyalty member, so you're going to get this, but what does Tim want or what does John want specifically?
Okay. Tim, any other thoughts on the CRM loyalty front?
Well, CRM is kind of the centerpiece of capturing that data, right? It's relationship management, right? How do you build a relationship? You meet somebody at a party, you introduce yourself, you tell them the name, maybe they ask you where you work, do you have kids, what age are they? And there are these pieces of information that you remember, and then when you run into that person again, oh, how are the kids? How's he doing at school? I look at CRM when you're talking about at scale across an organization, it's kind of the brain that holds that intelligence about those relationships. If you can capture those touch points as the relationships being built, now you can leverage that. So I really look at it as kind of the brain for holding that institutional knowledge that can then be delivered in an automated fashion across the enterprise on demand once it's been captured in an effective way.
Okay. So Jenna, who's doing it well in hospitality?
Oh, Michael, this is such a hard question for me because in the aspect of what I just means to me is when I'm personally giving Tim or John a specific offer and rates for them, I don't think anybody is doing that well. I think if you're in a user group of a loyalty member, you're getting rates to that specific user group, but to be personal, to be truly what this means, to John's comment of it's a buzzword, nobody's doing it well. And I think hospitality has invested in RFID technology, so when you're in Disneyland, you can use your little wristband and you can get things, but we haven't invested or have figured out a way to constantly fulfill personalization in the buying experience.
I would add to that, it's often at the smaller properties that you get, some of the most personalized experience I've had is people when you have the metal key and it's somebody it's a family business, because on a smaller scale, it's easier. We can have a conversation, but expanding that across, hundreds of hotels and dispersed geographic locations becomes very difficult.
And to get the consistency. Yeah.
Tim and John agree with Jenna, or do you think someone's doing it well?
Well, so I think, I'm probably a little less hard on hoteliers and their ability to drive contextual or personal experiences, primarily because I don't believe that every experience that a visitor makes to one of your customer engagement channels has to be highly personalized. I think that personalization is a crawl, walk, run initiative. And there are a number of things that you can do to make that experience the visitor or the guest or the customer or consumer is having with you a little bit more relevant. And just that in itself will create a better experience for you. So, using Tim's example, I hear in between the lines that he likes that airline. And there are these little spike moments. They're not consistent. They're not every single time that he does it, but there's little spike moments in his journey that helps reinforce that strength of brand, of relationship that he has with that brand. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep into consideration when we start talking about contextual or personal experiences, is there are simple things that you can do in order to drive a more relevant conversation.
I totally agree with that, and I totally agree in the crawl, walk, run, but I'm happy to be hard on hotel companies because I think there's no excuse when the bar has been set so high at other points in the journey that we're unable to deliver on that. I'll give you an example. Recently, I went to a conference. I won't name names, but this is a global hotel chain with an award-winning global loyalty program that I am at the top tier of. I didn't book the reservation. My events team did. I got to the front desk after a long travel day, and she said, "Are you an elite? Are you a member of the loyalty program?" As a matter of fact, I am. Would you like me to enter your number? I don't see it here. Absolutely, I would. What's your number? I don't know my number. It's the 20-digit alphanumeric code. I don't remember that. Can you look it up for me? Sure. What's the address where you initiated the program? You mean you want my address? No, I want the address where you initiated the program. So I start going through my current address, I moved recently, my next address, just typing it in. Is it this? No. Is it that? How about we try that? I was at the front desk for 7-8 minutes. Finally, I said, I don't care about the points, just give me my key when I go to my room. So this is an award-winning program. I think, where technology is today, there's absolutely no excuse for that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So what about outside hospitality? Tim, you just mentioned that the bar's been set. So who's setting it?
I mentioned Uber. I mean, by its very nature, it's a personalized experience. It has to be for safety and a number of other things and making sure the right person's getting in the car. But there's also a lot of information in your palm of your hand about the person you're driving with. So they've done a really good job, I think.
And recently moving to Hawaii, I do a lot of online shopping, and there's several shoe companies that know exactly what I'm looking for. I see it served up in my emails, served up on social media, and I just can't help myself but want to buy those shoes.
Right.
And I think it's called Shoeify or something like that. It's kind of like a Shopify play, but with shoes.
All right.
So,
John? I think the one that we all kind of recognize that pioneered this is Amazon, and they never cease to amaze me, and not just through the digital channel, but you'll probably get an indication as to how often we use Amazon, but the driver knows us by name now, and in fact comes in at Halloween time, comes in for Halloween candy. So, they've been able to actually translate that experience through different customer engagement channels, and I think they've done a good job consistently through that process.
I gave them a hard time in my presentation, but I got an email from them yesterday with recommendations for the month, and I bought 3 books from that one email. So yeah, they do a really good job.
So Tim, you mentioned that it's not easy in your presentation. So can you talk about some of the hurdles?
Well, you're dealing with a lot of disparate data in different systems. That inherently is challenging and is hard. Some of it's modern, some of it's not, some of it's been around a while. You have different gatekeepers around that data and what their security protocol is. So the heavy lift is really getting all of that data connected and pulling it together. That's the hardest part. Once you have that, then the fun part begins, and you can really start doing some very compelling things with that data.
So, John, you guys are focused on the sort of digital user experience. How do you ensure a consistent experience for websites, potentially an app, to on property? It's that whole journey, but
yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with personalization is the marketing team typically has a love-hate relationship with it. There's the value of what it can do for you from the standpoint of connecting with consumers, but it just seems like a big daunting task to get there. And it is if you don't have the right technology. I think there's 2 key components in order to be able to deliver a contextual and personalized experience across different customer engagement channels. Tim's talked about one of them being the data, and certainly the guest profile data that you have in a CRM is the epicenter of that. But there's also other data that you have to take a look at, whether that's previous visitor data to any of your digital channels, in-moment data that's collecting as well. But you've got to be able to figure out how to bring that data together and connect it so that you can map out a customer journey that is appropriate to that person that's interacting with you. The second part that makes it difficult if you don't have the right technology is it's really about delivering relevant content that the customer actually cares about. And one of the biggest challenges that hotel brands have is, where's my content? They have content sitting in multiple systems and multiple applications. So even if they've actually connected all of the data together and they understand the segment that this customer is and the journey that they would like to bring this customer on, they don't have the content available to them to be able to create and curate that experience as they go across different channels, whether that's a website or a web app or a landing page or an email, et cetera, right? And so fundamentally, you really need to have a technology that allows you to span those different applications. You need a digital experience management system that allows you to be able to access the content and deliver that to the audience, whatever channel that they're looking on. So it really requires, yes, it requires connecting data together, but it also requires robust content management, and it requires omnichannel automation.
Okay. So Tim, is it really feasible to connect all of that?
Absolutely, we do it all the time. That's why we're in business. Yeah, it's we've been doing it for over a decade. So, and the industry's changing. I think systems are modernizing. There's more APIs available, so the connectivity piece is becoming more streamlined. But yeah, it's absolutely possible, and we have a lot of examples of that.
So Jenna, beyond sort of dynamic rates and packages, what else can be done from a revenue management side?
Where I've seen it work best is when there's a blend of organization from the marketing side, revenue management, and the operations side through the customer journey that you were sharing with us. Each of those touch points is an opportunity to maximize a transaction with the guest. So whether it's asking for a different room type or an upsell during the buying process, during the pre-arrival process, which is personally my favorite part, selling spa, golf, dining experiences, opportunities for special stay, like a dinner on the beach. Each of those are so many opportunities to make money. And then again, once they check out, it's earning their business back again through the relationship marketing. So it just needs to be such a lockstep with marketing and technology to make it happen for the guest.
So Tim, we've heard sort of a lot about marketing, revenue management. What about leveraging that data on property?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked about that as the data automation piece. So we're in a place now where it's very possible to push that same data and those profiles and preferences to the front lines of the business, like I talked about. So, I was just thinking while Jenna was talking, it really is, there's no one piece of technology that's going to solve your personalization challenges or desires. It's really a concerted effort. You need the CRM to bring all the data together. You need to be able then, in an automated fashion, deliver that data in a relevant way. But if the person at the front desk has that data at their fingertips, but they haven't been trained or they're not bought into changing their process, they're not going to use it. They're just going to say, "Have you stayed with us before?" And they're going to ignore that. So it really is, it's an operational change as well within the organization, deciding. And look, it can be difficult, that piece of it. We have some clients that have preference forms that have 40 different questions on them because they can deliver on the room temperature. They can deliver on what type of pillow do you want. They can deliver on all these details because they're structured that way. We have other people we work with who ask 3 questions because that's what they can deliver on operationally. So if you're going to ask somebody their preferences and then you can't meet them, that's almost worse. You might as well not even ask in the first place. So it's not just about the piece of technology, but it's the strategy behind it and how it's going to be implemented across that entire life cycle.
So John, can you give us an example of where you've seen that work and really focus in on sort of the success metrics? How do you determine that it was successful?
Yeah, so let me start with the success metrics or the KPIs, if you will. I think the obvious one that we would look at is conversions, lift in conversions. And I've, probably like all of you, I've read the e-consultancy type articles where, they'll cite there's a 20% increase in conversions for companies that have adopted personalization. But I would go back and say that the KPIs that you use really should be aligned with the strategic goals that you have for personalization. And all of those are not just about conversion. They could be about getting more people to sign up for their loyalty program. They could be about increasing the engagement level that people have on the digital channels that you have. So you really need to align the KPIs with the strategic goals that you have in mind for personalization. And I'll give you an example. Design Hotels is a customer of ours. And to know Design Hotels, conversion is probably the last metric that they actually look at, because it's really more important for them to introduce consumers to their brand, which is very differentiated and really the stepping stone to being able to start a conversation and a relationship with consumers. So they actually, in our CMS, they use a functionality that we have that's called a first visit trigger. And they provide a different experience to consumers that first visit the website versus those that have returned, versus those that are part of their, that have an account with them and are in in a login situation. And the first visit to them it's really important for them to visually bring that consumer through the brand journey. So they have a banner, like everybody has, these rotating banners on their homepage. And the banner that shows up if you're a first-time visitor is a welcome to Design Hotels implicitly that says, discover Design Hotels through a visual journey. And that clicks through to an image gallery that is a beautiful library of architectural and lifestyle images across the Design Hotels portfolio. So they've been able to curate an experience that is more relevant to a first-time visitor to introduce them to the Design Hotels brand, which is great. But the real benefit and value to it is now they're starting to collect in-moment or data on what this person is looking at and how they're viewing it. So they've very carefully curated the images so that if I start walking down the path of beach-type resorts, then they've collected that data, and now they can start using that data to help move that person through an appropriate journey for that person. So to me, that's a really simple way of implementing a personalization or a contextual type of an experience. And their metrics on those are, they look at what percentage of first-time visitors actually go to that gallery and start viewing it. What length of time do those people have on their website versus those that do not go to the gallery? And they put a page value on the gallery as well. And so they've used these types of metrics to understand whether they are connecting with consumers and having the opportunity to introduce their brand to them.
That's great. Thank you. So final question, we'll start with Jenna. So from a revenue management lens, what's the one thing, if anyone in the audience today wanted to get started on personalization, what's the first thing they should tackle?
I think it's working with marketing to segment out the database and find offers that go to those each segmentations. That's the very first thing. That's the easy way.
Tim, from a CRM loyalty?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jenna, right? I mean, getting the data centralized is core to driving a lot of this activity that we've been talking about today. And to kind of tag onto what John was saying about loyalty, whether you have having a loyalty program, or if you're not big enough to have the scale of a loyalty program, a guest kind of recognition or guest portal really opens up a lot of opportunity, around to capture first-party reported data. You're asking your guests to share something about themselves, and that takes the highest precedent in the hierarchy of data that we capture. And you're also having them then create an account and authenticate. So once they're authenticated, you know who they are, and you can speak to them in a more direct way. So I'd say the database, but also consider creating opportunities for the guest to actually tell you why they're staying with you and why they like to travel.
John?
Yeah, I'll go back to my earlier comment. I think you really need to identify where you are in the process. As I mentioned, I think it's a crawl, walk, run initiative. You have to recognize where you are. I think that the challenge that we all fall into is we try to bite off more than we can chew initially, and we believe that going into it is we have to provide every single visitor to our website, for example, a personalized experience. I think you need to understand where you are in that process. Without the data, you can't really provide the relevant experiences, and without the content, you can't actually use the data to drive relevant experiences. So I think, and I'll ladder on the example that I used. I think one simple way that any person in the digital marketing team at a hotel brand can do is very simply on your website recognize that a first visitor has a different type of experience than someone that's returning versus someone that is a customer. And if it is a customer, find a way of creating a perpetual login so that you know they're a customer, and greet them like they're a customer on your website. Provide them that experience that they are a customer. And if they are just experiencing your brand, provide them an experience that allows them to introduce or learn about your brand and why they should be engaged with you on it.
Great, thank you. We'll open it up for questions. There's a mic up here. Or
mind if I go ahead? So yeah, that is a challenge, right? I think that it's hard. Sometimes it's harder to be simple, right? If you told me to do a 100-slide PowerPoint, no problem. If you told me to deliver the same message in 10, that would be a lot more difficult, right? So there are ways technology can help you with that problem. This is kind of the universe of things that are on the menu to say to the guest. But if you know who that guest is and you have some information about their history, you can trigger it in a way that it only delivers the prompts that are most relevant to that guest on that stay in that moment, and forget the rest. So you have to be willing to get rid of some of that. And I know there's various stakeholders. You can ask John, right? Every department wants to be on the homepage of the website,
Absolutely.
right? So there are always those challenges. But if you use the metrics to track what's working and what's delivering the outcomes that you want, whether it be revenue or upsell or upgrade, you can tailor it in a way that's going to focus on the goals of the organization, would be my recommendation.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll add to that is I think increasingly we need to recognize that there are a lot of customer engagement channels. And it sounds like they're all being left up to the front desk to channel all of that information through there. I think there's a great opportunity to use technology and use digital to help take some of that burden off of the front desk. There's a huge amount of work that can be done pre-stay, and introducing that guest to the hotel in a very personalized way in stay. I'll give you another example. We have a customer in England, a very expensive hotel. ADR, I think, is around £1,800. And one of the things they do pre-stay is they will find out what your flight information is so that they know when your flight has landed. And because they connect into FlightAware and they understand, it's not the scheduled time, it's actually the plane landing. And they'll send out a text message to to you and say, welcome, we see that you've landed. There are 3 ways to get to our hotel. You can take a private car, click here if you want a private car. You can take the tube, click here for the route and the exit doors that you would go through, etc. Or you can take the express train in from London, so in from the airport. So they have started that journey and they've started that engagement through a digital channel rather than having to wait for an individual person have that communication with them, right? And I think there's a ton of those types of things that we can do as digital marketers to set up success for the team that's on site when that guest arrives. So they know where the business lounge is already. They know where the gym is. They know what time the gym is. If that's part of what their guest profile says is important to them, right?
I would add to that too, we've also looked at if people book during the pre-stay process, if you're booking your dinner reservations or spa appointments or whatever it might be, cancellation rates go way down. So if you get that offer from Jenna for $20 off your room rate, you've already invested all this time in dreaming about the property, you're less likely to switch at that point.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm interested in knowing what impact you see, if any, to collecting and using data personalization as a result of the recent data privacy efforts and concerns, both here in the U.S. and abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. That GDPR kind of changed the whole world and the whole game. So, GDPR is still rolling out. I think there's still a lot of misconceptions about it. I think most companies at this point have assigned a privacy officer, and the lawyers. I think the lawyers made the most money off GDPR out of anyone. But yeah, it's all about explicit consent, right? So changing your tactics so you're only communicating with people. I would argue in the long run that it's going to improve the quality of what we do as marketers, because you are only communicating with people who have explicitly said, I want to have a relationship with you. So, there's positive and negatives to it as well. The size of your database probably got a lot smaller going through the process, but yeah, the penalties are real, and it's something that everybody has to be aware of.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I actually think that it will make us better marketers. There's not a consumer out there that says, I'd like to give you my data. There's a consumer that's out there that says, I'd like to have a relevant, contextual, personalized experience when I'm interacting with your brand. And in exchange for giving you my data, you give me that.
Right.
I think what's happened over time is, as marketers, we've become sloppy and lazy, and we didn't provide that experience to consumers. So government stepped in and said, we're going to protect our citizens' data. And so I think in the long run, we'll become much better marketers, because the holy grail to all marketers has always been about delivering a personalized experience to our consumer group, right? And I think this will help us get there.
Any other questions? In the back there?
One of your slides, you were talking about integrations and recommendations about pricing. How can you manage to do that without violating the rate by parity and these kind of stuff? What kind of recommendations are you talking about?
From a pricing standpoint, I mean, that would be taking the guest history information in the profile and potentially recommending rates based on what we know about, like Jenna was talking about in the booking engine. If we know you've stayed with us 15 times and all 15 times you booked a suite, we're not going to show you the bar rate. We're going to show you suites. So it's about kind of filtering the experience more in line with what past history is. Does that make sense? Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Jen, any thoughts on
Yeah.
parity and
Yes.
personalization?
So we've had a lot of conversations about, earning our customers back and working with them direct and cutting the sort down. And, in talking with Michael even before this panel, how can we funnel the guests to get them into a recommendation so they don't have to do all that legwork? So I think understanding who they are, giving them recommendations, getting to a certain landing page, and then having certain promo codes linked through to the booking engine will get them there. And then eventually we'll get to a day where once you're a known customer, then I can give you a certain price based on your past stay.
A dynamic rate in the
Yeah,
moment.
a dynamic rate just for you. Yeah.
Right. That's the holy grail, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
chasing it.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it. Have a
everybody,
great
for
show.
coming.
Thank you, everyone.